Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. It's that time of the morning and that time of the season where we are trying to have as many conversations with those people who are asking us for our votes as possible. This morning, our conversation is with Judge Shannon Gremillion. He is a candidate for Louisiana Supreme Court Judge. Judge, good morning and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a thrill. I'm excited about being here.
We're excited to have you. I think it's important for us to really take a deeper dive into the candidates that are asking for our votes. So let's go back to your family's history, a long line of your family and service.
Yes, ma'am. Well, my family's service history goes back a long way, further back than I do. My grandfather, in fact, several of my grandfathers were World War II vets, and then my father was a veteran of the Vietnam War. He flew 68 combat missions over Vietnam. He likes to tell people the closest he ever got to Vietnam was a mile over it. But the fact is he fought in Vietnam for 5 years. Then he came back, and ultimately he became a judge, and so I was actually raised by a judge who was a trial court judge in Concordia and Catahoula Parish. About the time I got married and finished law school in 1995, he decided he wanted to run for the Third Circuit Court of Appeal, and he did, and was fortunate enough to be elected. And so he served there for many years, and then in 2008, he decided it was time for him to retire, and he did, and I ran to replace him, and I was fortunate enough to be elected. So I have been a judge on the Third Circuit Court of Appeal for the last 12 years.
Let's talk about your dad's influence and, the stories that you had heard from your grandfather. What were the conversations like about not just servanthood, but the law?
Yeah. Well, my dad always taught us that we were a nation of laws and not of men, and that, justice was nothing if it wasn't blind. Justice was for everybody, not just for some people. Equality was for everybody, not just for some people. But honestly, I remember a story. It was a Thanksgiving day. I know Thanksgiving's coming up, and we were sitting at the Thanksgiving table, and there was a knock on the door. Somebody wanted to talk to the judge. And my dad got up and went out and spent 15 or 20 minutes. In Concordia Parish, we say they spit and kick trees for about 15 or 20 minutes. And he came back in, and some teenager, I'm not going to tell you who, said, "Well, geez, Dad, I hope that was important." And I'll never forget the answer to the question. He stuck his finger in the air and he said, "It was important to them." Those of us that do any kind of public service, it's very easy for us to get into a habit of, well, this is just what we do every day. This is just our day-to-day job, and we're going to go and do it today and go home. We'll do it again tomorrow. But we have to always remember that the people that are coming before us, the people that are using the services, of a public servant, it's the most important thing in their lives. So when someone comes before me as a judge, I can never forget that it is the most important thing in that person's life. You're dealing with their future, you're dealing with their freedom, you're dealing with their family, you're dealing with the things that are the most critical to them, and you always have to take it as seriously as they're taking it.
Did you internalize that when that person came to your family's house on Thanksgiving and your dad steps away from family and festivities to engage in what's important to this person? Did you internalize that some sort of way at that moment?
I did, because it was not the answer that I expected. I was a snot-nosed teenager, and I thought he was going to be sheepish about having stepped away. But he made it very clear that no, that was what was important. And if somebody else needed him, he'd get up and go again, because that's what you are when you're a public servant. You're there to help people when they need you.
Sure, and when it's not convenient.
That's right. In fact, it really only matters when it's not convenient. Anybody can be a good public servant when it's convenient.
Sure. And so what do you think is the most important thing that you learned from your dad, growing up, and obviously him maybe being taken away from the family at times that were not opportune, and things that maybe he told you that he learned from his dad? What were those lessons?
Well, I think the most important thing is that the people out there, that when they need you, they really need you. And there's no shortcuts. As a trial court judge, I remember police officers coming to the house to get warrants in the middle of the night in order to search or to arrest somebody, and my father took as much time and energy with a warrant that was at 3 in the morning as he did at one that was in 3 in the afternoon, because he knew that Fourth Amendment, the right against unlawful searches and seizures, was just as important in the middle of the night as it was in the middle of the day. So so I guess the roundabout way of answering your question is to say that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and honor. And just because you have the authority to take away somebody's freedom, or to invade somebody's home, or to arrest somebody, doesn't mean that you always should. Sometimes the better part of being a judge is showing restraint and not acting just because you have the legal authority to do so.
How have your life's experiences affected you when you have had people before you that were different than your own? Their experience is different from your experiences, still trying to be fair and equitable while understanding that there are differences.
Well, at the end of the day, it's really not all that hard, and I'll tell you why. It's because anybody that's different from me, whether we're talking about race or gender or sexual preference or regional, people that don't live in town, whatever, the law is still the law. And I've always been a judge that's going to follow the law first. I'm going to follow the law in the middle, and I'm going to follow the law at the end. And so I believe more than anything else that, again, you asked what my father taught me, and that was a favorite phrase of his: we are a nation of laws and not of men. And so it doesn't matter what color you are or what religion you are. What matters is what the law says. And I'm not, as a judge, little 10th grade civics lesson, I'm not here to make the law, and I'm not here to enforce the law. I'm here to interpret the law, and I'm going to interpret the law as written. I'm not going to interpret it the way I wish it was. I'm going to interpret the way it is. And sometimes that means a lawyer's going to walk out of my courtroom with a lot of money, for example. Sometimes it means that same lawyer's going to walk out of my courtroom with no money. Sometimes it means an accused criminal is going to walk out of my courtroom a free man, and sometimes it means he's going to go to jail for a long time. And none of those external things, those immutable things like race and color, matter at all. Now, sometimes the facts are very hard, and you have a case, for example, where a child has been abused or something like that, and it does become difficult to continue to follow the law and not to just get angry and vengeful. But you know what? That's when you need a judge the most. Again, it's easy to be a judge when the facts are clear and the facts are easy. And it gets very difficult when you're looking at a dead woman or an injured child or something of that nature. But that's when it's time for a judge to step up and do his or her job to the best of his or her ability.
When do you think you started to have the passion? I know you went to law school, you went to undergraduate, you went to law school, but when did that passion for becoming a judge, that burning fire?
That's a great question, and I can only go back to my father. I watched my father do it. I watched my father do it well. I watched the people around him respond to him because he was doing it well. And so I think I knew from a very early age that I wanted certainly to be a lawyer, because that's what obviously my dad was a lawyer as well. So there was never any equivocation. I know some kids change their majors and do different things like that. I went straight through and got my law degree as efficiently as I could because I knew I wanted to practice law. And I did practice law for many years, and I enjoyed that as well. But there was never really any question in my mind
about what you do.
That's right. When my dad said it was time to retire, I was going to run to replace him, and that's the way it went down. But honestly, you ask about the fire and the passion. I have to give credit to my father. I'm very fortunate. I know not everybody grows up in a household where their father is a hero to them. And I grew up in that household where my father I saw him as not just as a dad, but as a hero and somebody that was worth copying and emulating. And so I grew up that way. And so that passion has been with me since I was old enough to understand what passion was.
Mm-hmm. What did your dad teach you about excellence? Because obviously he was a man of excellence.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I grew up not only with my dad, but I grew up within a quarter mile of all four of my grandparents. Which the older,
all four of them.
That's right.
Wow.
And the older I get, the more I realize what a privilege that was. And all four of them, plus my dad, plus my mom, had a saying that I bet I heard 2,000 times growing up, over and over and over and over again. And you've heard it too. And it goes like this: if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And so my dad taught me that over and over and over again. So, you know, there was never really an excuse for anything other than excellence in my household, because if it was worth doing, it was worth doing right.
Wow, powerful. Let's take a break here, but when we come back, we'll talk about what we all need to understand about the Louisiana Supreme Court judge. What is his job? What are his responsibilities? And how do we make the best decision for Louisianians? Stay on point. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. As we get very, very close to Election Day, November 3rd, I think it's so important that we just sit down and have a one-on-one with those people who are asking for our vote. And this morning, we're privileged to have Judge Shannon Gremillion. He is a candidate for Louisiana Supreme Court judge. So a lot of family history, a lot of service history.
Yes, ma'am.
And so when you tell your dad, I'm going to be running for Louisiana Supreme Court judge, is it like the next progression, or what goes into that next step?
That's a great question. It is the progression. When you're a judge on the Louisiana Appellate Court, there's not a whole lot of different ways that you can get a promotion, and so essentially that's what I'm doing, is asking the voters of the state of Louisiana for the one promotion that's available to me. So he was excited about that. He wanted to see me get that promotion. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm just being painfully honest with you, is the Supreme Court is a very hard job. It is, you know, I'm one of 5 appellate courts in the state. I work on one of 5 appellate courts in the state. So the work is dispersed a lot more than it is at the Supreme Court, because there's just one Supreme Court. And I'd love to explain to you exactly what the Supreme Court does, how they spend most of their time. So at the appellate court level, we have what we call mandatory jurisdiction, which means if you can appeal it, I can hear it. People want to know, do you do the criminal side or the civil side? I say yes. I do both. Criminal, the civil, I do workers' compensation, I do family, domestic, business transactions, contracts, whatever happens. In fact, that's the fun of the appellate court, is it can be so many different things.
In other words, if you're not satisfied with the verdict and it needs an appeal, whatever area it is, you're going to hear those cases.
I'm going to hear it. Mandatory, got to, will, must, have to. And as a result, you get a real big diversity of cases. I love to tell people about the time right after I got on the bench that I had a case that was involving a $200 million contract that was a part of a multi-billion-dollar liquid petroleum plant that had been built down in Cameron Parish. And then the very next case was somebody's cat.
Somebody's cat.
So,
wow.
And you know what's funny about that is if you were to Google those 2 cases, you'd probably find more about Gurley the house cat than you would about that big other case, because people found it more interesting.
And so as you move forward into this promotion, why do you feel that you're going to be better for this promotion?
Well, that's a great question. The answer is there are only, in the whole history of the world, there's only ever been 2 different kinds of courts. There's trial courts and there's appellate courts. The Louisiana Supreme Court is an appellate court. So I have 12 years of experience as an appellate court judge, and I've got a very good record. I have written hundreds of cases I have been involved in the writing and the rulings of well over 1,000 cases. What is the job of an appellate court judge? It is to review the work of lower court judges and to write opinions on those reviews. What is the job of a Supreme Court justice? It is to review the work of lower court judges, and to write opinions on those reviews. So I believe that my experience and my qualifications are exactly the right ones for this job. By comparison, my opponent has about 2 years' experience on the appellate court bench. So I believe it's my experience that sets me apart and makes me the right candidate for the job.
Tell us about, for those of us who are lay people, and for most of us we are, about those opinions, because you have written literally hundreds. Or maybe even thousands of opinions. What does that mean to the layperson?
Well, again, on appellate court level, if you go to your local court, and here in Alexandria we're talking about the 9th Judicial District Court, or Richard Starling's City Court, either one, Alexandria City Court, and you don't like your result, you go to the Third Circuit Court of Appeal, and we will take every word that was uttered in that trial. We won't relitigate the case. We won't recall the witnesses again, but we'll take every word that was uttered at that trial. We'll take every picture that was shown at that trial. We'll take every piece of evidence that was shown in every trial. We'll take every document that was shown at that trial. And sometimes we get a record, call that the record. We get a record that's like that, just a few pages. And sometimes we get records that would fill up this whole room.
Wow.
And in each instance, we're going to review every word of it. And we are going to produce a legal opinion that has the force of law the vast majority of the time. The only way that opinion would lose its force of law would be if the Louisiana Supreme Court reversed it, which does happen, but it's a fairly rare thing. So that opinion is part and parcel of what I'm saying is the right of every litigant to have an appeal. It's not just a right to have a judge review their case or put some sort of stamp on it. It is a right to have it fully litigated in the appellate court and a legal opinion written, and not just by one judge, but 3 judges work on a panel. So you have 3 appellate judges that are reviewing that case.
Sure. And so before we've got to let you go, I know that your parents have played a role in this, but then you have a wife and children. And this is, I can imagine when you run for office, this affects everybody.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Tell us about your family and this journey.
Well, what I can tell you is, you're right, is it overtakes everything that goes on in the house. We're now approaching a year, and it's very easy for a candidate to get kind of narcissistic and think that that's the only thing going on in their world, when that's truly not the case. But but what I can tell you is, my wife Kimberly and my children Christian and Ann Marlowe have been spectacular. They have been great. They have been. My wife is a much better politician than I am, to be honest with you. So I'm glad to have her around most of the time. And then my kids even have stepped away from my son's a college student, and my daughter is doing well at Ash High School, and they've stepped away from some of their activities to help Dad run for office. So it's been great. It's been a lot of extra family time, a lot of extra traveling together.
What are your conversations like on the road? Because you've got one in high school, you got one in college, and I'm sure, Christian, you've passed down, the generations of servanthood and knowledge and everything that you have been made all these many years. What's that time like?
It's been great, and the number one thing, it's a great question, because the number one thing that Christian and I have been talking about this year is him going to law school.
I was wondering if he was going to law school.
He is now a senior at Louisiana Tech, majoring in economics. He's doing very well, making really good grades.
Is it an expectation that he would become an attorney, or does he have the same love, you think?
I think he's got the same love. That's a fair question, but I certainly...
Because he sure would be standing out if he wouldn't want to be a lawyer or a judge.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But my daughter, I think, is moving more towards the medical. She's a little bit younger, and she has time to change her mind, I suppose. But it's been great. And you know, the first thing you do when you get ready to go to law school is you take the LSAT, the law school admittance exam, and he's been studying and practicing that for most of this year. So we've had a lot of talks about that, about the LSAT, about how to do better on that, and about some tips that maybe Dad can give him to help him do a little bit better. But that's it. We've been talking about the next phase in his journey, and if I'm fortunate enough to win, and the voters out there vote for me, Shannon Gremillion, number 46, and I get down to New Orleans, which is where the court is, then there's a very good chance that he'd go to one of the New Orleans law schools, Loyola or Tulane. If I for some reason don't get down to New Orleans, then he'd probably go to LSU like I did.
There you go. Before we've got to let you go,
yeah,
I want you to look into the camera and tell people why you feel passionate about asking them to promote you to the Louisiana Supreme Court.
That I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Listen, it comes down to two things. First of all, it's the experience. As we've discussed, I have far more experience as an appellate court judge than anyone else in the race. And I think that I can say without fear or hesitation that I am the most qualified person. The other thing that I would tell you is I reflect your values. I'm 100% pro-family. I'm 100% pro-small business. I'm 100% pro-life. I'm 100% pro-Central Louisiana. I would love to be the first Rapides Parish person to be on the Louisiana Supreme Court. We have an opportunity to do something historic, and I hope you'll help me do that by voting for me, Shannon Gremillion, number 46 on your ballot.
There you go. Well, Judge Gremillion, the best of luck. May you and your family stay in good health and be blessed on this continued journey.
You're very kind. Thank you for having me.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back after this.